This video has been done before, and we're doing it again. We're ranking every single Danganronpa execution from every single game and anime. I chose executions instead of trials because for trials, a lot of the cases exist in a bubble that I can't definitively rank. As an example, I hate Danganronpa 2 Case 3 and Danganronpa V3 Case 3 about equally, so I can't decide which one of those two is the absolute worst. Also, please keep in mind that I'm ranking executions, not executions and body discoveries. None of the deaths in Danganronpa 3 Future Arc count as executions in my eye, but if you want to have them ranked, they'd be around 28 to 19, I don't know. Other than that, every other execution is fair game. I'm ranking these off multiple criteria. None of them really take any priority of other criteria in the rankings. The main criteria I'm ranking them off of is brutality, emotional impact on the player and characters, how well it represents the character being punished, and creativity. And to a minor extent, I'm also rating it on some odd criteria that some people don't think of when it comes to executions, which is humor, music, and how iconic it is. So, with that being said, let's start the list. Kotoko Utsugi, Punishment of the Fighter. I hate this execution. Like with the other Warriors of Hope executions, the execution is fairly uninspired. However, there is a reason that this one is worse than the rest of them and is the worst in the franchise, and that comes at the very end. Kotoko is a character that is very yikes. The entirety of Chapter 3 has been about sexualizing her, which is fucking disgusting, and this execution ends with a pantsuit shot, which I'm not showing for obvious reasons, of not only a child, but a victim of child molestation at that. I have no idea what the writers were thinking with this character, and this execution cements how much I hate how the writers of Danganronpa handled Kotoko, and cements this execution as my least favorite in the whole franchise. I'm sorry, Erica Lindbeck. I'm sorry you had to voice this character. Kamaru Nagi, Demon Hunting Begins. The video I watched apparently had this as an execution, and it plays the execution music, so I guess it is one. Either way, this is the least inspired quote-unquote execution in the series. I'm fine with executions where it looks like the character is going to die due to outside interference, but this one is just, there's no threat to Kamaru at all, since that would ruin the whole point of the demon hunting game. Also, it's just super boring. Yawn. Kamaru just gets dropped out of the parachute and down into the city. Kamaru Nagi, Helicopter Crash Episode. This one is also very bad. It's not even an execution in the way other executions are, because it's not really a punishment for breaking a rule or for dying in a trial. Instead, it's just a Monokuma robot doing Monokuma robot things. It's alright for brutality, nothing special. Masuru Diamond, Punishment of the Hero. It's a fairly uninspired execution. I dislike all of the Ultra Despair Girls execution, and in this one, Masuru is just grabbed and beaten up by a bunch of the Monokuma kids. There's nothing much to write about, so I'll keep this section short. Jotaro Kimuri, Punishment of the Priest. Again, it's fairly uninspired, and it's repeated by the other Warriors of Hope executions. It's uninspired, and there's really nothing to write home about. The one saving grace that puts this over Masuru's execution is the face reveal of Jotaro at the end. It's a cruel irony that Jotaro's face looks like that when you consider his character motivations. Nagisa Shingetsu, Punishment of the Sage. It's alright. There's nothing much to write about. Nagisa's robot just falls on him, killing him. I just like how it's unique when compared to the other Warriors of Hope's execution, as it doesn't take place in an arena like the other fights in the game, so he can't get dragged away by Monokuma kids. Yuta Asahina, Swimming Explosion Episode. I remember when I saw the execution art style and heard the music play when Yuta jumped in the water, I realized something bad was about to happen. This execution seller point is that, the shock value. It's the first quote-unquote execution in the game in which a character actually dies, unlike the ones with Komaru. The execution also has an impact on Komaru afterward. However, it's fairly uninspired, just him swimming when his bracelet explodes. Also, the execution didn't really have much impact on me since Yuta only gets 5 to 10 minutes of screen time before he's killed off. So, not a good execution, but definitely the best one in Ultra Despair Girls. Monomi's execution. This is an execution? Huh? Well, the video I had with all the execution listed it as one. It's okay. Monomi just gets filled with bullets. It's impressive, but it's not bad. The one part I do like about this execution is the bullet grazing Hajime's cheek. We don't often get to see other people getting involved in executions, and I enjoy when it does happen. However, other executions do this way better. Junko and Oshima, the ultimate punishment. I'm sorry, I just don't like this one. It's so fucking lazy. It just takes the other executions you've already seen and does them again. It's lazy, it's uninspired, it's boring. They could have come up with a better execution for Junko, but they went with this. The brutality of the executions don't really hold as much weight as when you first saw them, since you've already seen them. Plus the fact that Junko somehow lives through all the executions besides after school lesson, so you see how easy it was to survive. The one saving grace this execution has is Junko's expressions during the entire thing. It's funny in a fucked up way to see how much she enjoys being executed over and over. Kyoko Kirigiri, after school lesson. It's okay, it's just a very drawn out execution for a very simple death. It takes so long just to get to the point of her being executed, and the rest is just what? Her sitting in a chair. Also, while the Crusher is an okay way to execute someone, it's not extremely brutal. It's simple. However, it's not very inspired by Kyoko's talent. You'd think that since the aim of the trial was to execute Kyoko, Monokuma would have gotten a special punishment for her, but no, it's just this generic one. This execution does have some good music, however. I like the rock remix of the normal execution theme. Makoto Nagi, after school lesson. This is only slightly better than Kyoko's. However, it suffers from a lot of the same problems, namely the execution being drawn out. Again, it's just Makoto sitting in a chair the whole time. Another reason why this pisses me off is the fact that the execution makes more sense for Makoto than it does for Kyoko. This execution makes sense for Makoto because he's just a normal high school kid. His ultimate talent doesn't do much, unlike the rest of the students who have extra special punishments. However, as I said, since Monokuma's plan for the trial was to get Kyoko executed, why does the execution fit better for the last-minute change of plan victim instead of the intended one? That makes me angry. I do like how this is an execution that gets interrupted, though. It's something we don't see happen often, and I enjoy it when it does happen. Mikan Sumiki. Bye-bye, ouchies. Ah yes, the one that everyone paints as the worst execution in the franchise. And yeah, it's pretty bad. The problem with this one is that it's underwhelming. It's just a giant arm being pumped full of drugs and then launched into space. It's boring, it doesn't have much impact on me or the characters, it's just a filler execution. Just like the entire shitty trial preceding it! The one thing that puts this above the other executions is the music. I really like the Reach for the Stars motif that the executions in Danganronpa 2 had. Jin Kirigiri, Blast Off. It's nothing to write home about, it's just Jin being blasted into space and coming back down as a skeleton. It doesn't really fit Jin's character. To be honest, I think After School Lesson would have worked best for him, and Makoto and Kyoko would get custom executions. However, there's something about the art style of this execution that's just iconic to me. it sticks in my mind because of the art style, especially of the sun and the moon. It's memorable, and that's more than the previous executions can say. However, it didn't have any emotional impact on me because I didn't know who the character even was. I didn't realize who it was until doing research. Even after learning that Jin was executed by Monokuma, I didn't put 2 and 2 together until I had beaten the game and thought about it. Alter Ego, Excavator Destroyer. I have mixed feelings about this one. For one, the fact that the execution was even going to occur given the circumstances of the preceding trial was news in and of itself. However, when the Alter Ego's face showed up on screen, that threw me for a loop, and it had an emotional impact on me because of the subversions of expectations. However, the execution itself isn't anything to write home about. It's fairly uninspired and not too brutal, so overall, a bad execution that had an amazing impact. Tsumugi Shirogane and K1B0 Ultimate Annihilation. This one is okay. It's pretty uninspired since it's just Kibo blowing up a bunch of stuff. It's kind of boring and doesn't really fit their talents, but I guess that's alright because it isn't Monokuma performing the execution. However, there are a few things I do like about this execution. The first is Tsumugi mimicking Junko's hand wave before getting executed, and the costume falling away to show her frowning. It really shows how much of a facade Tsumugi's cosplay was, and it fits her despite the execution as a whole not fitting. Second is Kibo's decision to sacrifice himself. That took me by surprise, but I almost felt relieved with the fact that Shuichi, Maki, and Himiko were saved. So all in all, a meh execution with a few good moments. Celestia Ludenberg, The Burning of the Versailles Witch. This one is alright. It's a bit boring for most of it, as it's just Celeste being burned. However, the aesthetic really fits Celeste, and I like it, so it gets a pass from me. However, there's one thing that makes this execution get so high, and that's the fire truck at the end. It comes so far out of left field that it's hilarious. I like that aspect a lot. Teru Teru Hanamura, Deep Fried Teru Teru. This one is a bit for me too. I don't think it's brutal enough, especially when compared to the other two first chapter executions in the series. However, where it doesn't give in the brutality aspect, it more than makes up for the humor aspect. This is a hilarious execution. I love the subversion of expectations with the missiles making him get covered in eggs and starch, and having him be deep fried in a volcano is a really good way to represent his talent, as well as just being funny to me. Karaki Ocean, Cultural Melting Pot. This was another execution I really didn't like until the final moments. First of all, the burning to death gimmick had already been done with Celeste, so I knew something was going to happen. That being said, this burning is much more brutal than Celeste, and the spinning at the start was a nice touch. However, the two things that put it over the top for me was first, Maridam's death. Maridam was by far the best Monokub, and his death came out of left field for me because I thought that one of the other Monokubs would die. The second thing that makes me like this execution is the ending. I really like how Korekio's sister joins in on throwing salt at Korekio because it gives the fucked up boy what for. The ending shot with Monokuma and Korekio's sister sitting together was the cherry on top, because I found it very funny that Korekio did all this for his stupid fetish and he still got her stolen from him. Get fucking owned, Korekio. Fuck you. Alter Ego Junko, Force Shutdown. From this point onward, I have a more positive than negative look on the executions. For example, this one. This is more like it. A unique execution for Junko. It's not really too brutal, but it doesn't need to be because that would be stooping to Junko's level. I like the more happy-go-lucky feel they went with for this execution because it really shows off hope beating despair, which is at the core of Danganronpa. The music being this happy and being the happy opening helps with this. And it's also low-key a banger. Also, Usami beating Junko had an impact on me because I saw it as Shiaki beating Junko, as Shiaki and Usami are so connected. And if you know me, Shiaki is one of my favorite characters in the series besides of the 4 main series protagonists. Also, this execution made me cheer for Usami despite the fact that I actually like Junko's character a lot. It's just a fun execution. Leon Kuata, the 1000 Blows. This is a really good introductory execution. I like this one because it sets a tone for what executions are going to be going forward. It's brutal as all hell and super violent, and it's a great way to show off Leon's talent as the ultimate baseball star. It's not the most unique execution, but it's a great way to introduce the concept of executions to the player. It also has a large effect on both the characters and the player because it shows both of them how brutal these executions are really going to get. Mondo Owada, the Cage of Death. I like this execution because it's a good balance. It's a balance between brutality and hilariousness, which I really like in an execution. The bit with Mondo Butter is the best laugh I've ever had in an execution, and is really what makes the entire thing for me. However, the execution itself was super brutal, and it also hurts me to see Mondo get electrocuted like that, which made an impact on me. It also somewhat fits his talent as the ultimate biker gang leader, however, it doesn't fit as well as other executions such as Leon's. Gonta Gokuhara, Wild West Insecticide. I really like this execution, starting with the music. It fits the theme of the execution. The execution itself is depressing for both the viewers and the characters, because it's upsetting to watch Gonta having to go through the execution despite knowing how kind he was. It's super brutal, especially to me, and as I am terrified of bee stings. However, what puts this execution so high is twofold. The first is that Alter Ego Gonta gets executed along with Gonta. This was incredibly sad to me because it's like Monokuma wanted to make sure to erase all existences of Gonta with this execution. The second is the fact that both Monokubs die. I was assuming that one of them would die, but the other would die in Chapter 5, and the last chapter would just have no Monokubs. However, this trial subverted my expectations by not only killing both Monokubs, but the way that they died. That brings me to my final point, which is that this execution is just bizarre, and I love that for it. Kaito Momota, Blast Off, Second Ignition. I really like this execution a lot. I love how it's a callback to Jin's execution, because I found Jin's execution to be iconic, as I said earlier, and I love callbacks to previous games and series like this. Despite it being slightly underwhelming in the brutality aspect, that's okay because of what it does for the characters. This is another execution that gets interrupted. Despite Kaito dying, he doesn't die to the execution, but to his own sickness, and only once achieving his dream of going to space. This gives a morale boost to both the characters and the player, because it sticks it to Monokuma. Kaito's confident smile in the execution was so bittersweet. Also, this execution has lasting ramifications on the plot besides the character's death, because it knocks off Kibo's Ahoge, making him go insane. I like executions that do this. Gundam Tanaka Stampede. This execution is a really good one for multiple reasons. While it's not too brutal, with the violence really only occurring in one single blow, it more than makes up for it in two aspects. The first is Gundam's magic circle. Not only is it failing despite the majority of the runtime of the execution being spent setting it up funny, it is also fitting towards Gundam's character, as he views himself as a supreme overlord of evil, when in fact he's literally just an animal breeder. Finally, the best part of the execution is how it tugs at the player's heartstrings. First, Gundam makes sure to leave the 4 Dark Devas away from the violence before the execution, which is really kind of him. Finally, the ending scene with the devas grieving over him and the angel animals taking him away was so depressing to me. Kurumi Tojo, Strand of Agony. Finally, we get to the 5 best executions. These executions are near perfect in my eyes. Note that I say perfect, not flawless, because some of them still have flaws, but the good of them far outweigh the bad. Starting off our top 5, we have Kurumi's execution. It's one of the most brutal executions in the series, in my opinion. It looks like torture just to go through. And I also really like the premise of this execution because it takes place while Kurumi is running away, so she thinks it's not a scripted execution, but it gives her hope of escaping. This comes to a head when she reaches what she thinks is an exit after the torture of climbing up the strand and being attacked by saw blades, just to find out that the exit was a crude drawing and falls to her death. This fits Kurumi's desperation in her character. Finally, I found Monosuke's death the funniest of all the Monokub's deaths. There's something funny about the camera angle and the way Monodam drop kicks Monosuke that's funny to me. Shiaki Nanami, please insert coin. It hurts me to put this one this low, and yes, I said low, because for a long time I thought it was my favorite. However, after thinking about it critically, I found a few flaws in it that I can't just ignore. The flaw with this execution is that it's too lighthearted, considering who's being executed. Shiaki is an important character to the plot, and her death was saddening to me, but the events that occur in the execution are a bit too lighthearted on rewatch. However, the execution really fits Shiaki's talent as the ultimate gamer, and is a great reference to a bunch of classic arcade games, which I enjoyed. However, what puts this execution so high is how iconic it is in my eyes. This is the first execution I think of when someone mentions a Danganronpa execution, and it's probably due to a combination of who's being executed, the way they're executed, and finally, the music. The music is the most iconic of any execution music in the series, and it's fucking catchy, and I hate that. And the Danganronpa developers know how catchy the song is, because they stuck a remix of it, which you're hearing right now, in a random-ass minigame in Danganronpa V3, just to twist the knife in harder. Thanks, Spike Chunsoft. Very epic. Peko Pekoyama, One Woman Army. This is the most action-packed execution. It's fast-paced and hectic, however at the same time it's also brutal, especially the ending with Fuyuhiko. It's also incredibly sad for the player to watch what happens between the two. More on Fuyuhiko later, but first, I really like how Monokuma controls Peko as a puppet throughout this execution, because it's a great symbolism for how Peko viewed herself as Fuyuhiko's tool. Finally, I mentioned earlier that I love executions where other characters get involved, and this is the pinnacle of that. What this punishment does for Fuyuhiko's character is nothing short of incredible. Before this execution, I despised Fuyuhiko, but after this execution, he got a redemption arc and he became one of my favorite characters in the series. My one problem with this execution is that it puts more of a spotlight on Fuyuhiko than it does the actual person being executed, but that's alright because of what it does for Fuyuhiko. All in all, this execution is a great way to show off the bond between Fuyuhiko and Peko, and is also the start of Fuyuhiko's amazing redemption arc. Shiaki Nanami, Shiaki Nanami's punishment. I can only show stills of this execution due to copyright for anime, so I can't get it across as well. I recommend you go watch this execution for yourself to get the full picture. This execution hits so many marks on the head, it's unreal. It's one of the most brutal executions in the series, and it's awful to see what Shiaki is going through. It made me so upset to see what she had to go through. It is also one of the most influential executions in the series, as it is what causes all of Class 77B to become Ultimate Despairs. And I don't blame them, I nearly went fucking insane after watching this too. It's so fucking brutal and sad, especially with Chiaki's determination to make it through, even though you know she's going to die at the end. While it's a bit uninspired, it still feels like it fits Chiaki's characters because of the music. The music used makes it feel like a dungeon crawling game, almost, which fits Chiaki's talent. Finally, The scene between Shiaki and Izuru at the end is one of the saddest moments in the entire franchise. Kaede Akamatsu, Der Flowalzer. I probably butchered that pronunciation, but whatever. This is the pinnacle of Danganronpa executions. It is near flawless. As someone with a fear of asphyxiation, this is the most brutal execution in the series. Watching Kaede being played with like a fucking doll to play the piano. The stoning by the Monokuma crowd is just the cherry on top of the brutality cake. Whenever I see this execution, I want to look away and hide my eyes. It's that fucking brutal and terrifying to me. For that same reason, this execution is incredibly sad for both the player and the characters. It's awful to watch a character you played as to go through this. It also affects the characters deeply, especially Shuichi, as he carries on Kaede's last wish throughout the rest of the game. It really sets up Shuichi's character to shine as the protagonist in the rest of the game, and it also introduces the Monokubs dying off one by one, and they kill the worst one first, thank fucking god. But all in all, the brutality of this execution makes it the best one in this franchise.